The American Gilded Age was less an era than an opera, a spectacle of ambition sung by men whose names became institutions. Andrew Carnegie, the self-fashioned philosopher of capital, forged steel into destiny, then scattered his fortune to test whether his heirs could build rather than inherit greatness. Gould, a virtuoso of speculation, commanded the railroad with brilliance both feared and begrudged. His legend, however, proved less durable than his ledgers. Yet, no dynasty captured the paradox of American wealth more than the Vanderbilts, a family name synonymous with both the heights of American prosperity and the depths of financial recklessness. Most Vanderbilt descendants have had to rebuild from nothing. Yet, there exists a notable exception. Indeed, this one branch of that lineage refused extinction. In the green hush of North Carolina's mountains, a quieter discipline took root. Guided by foresight and restraint, the Cecils, Vanderbilts by blood and temperament, transformed inheritance into endurance. And thus, in today's episode of Old Money Empires, we learn how one branch of America's most extravagant dynasty learned the rare art of preservation. For many, the name Vanderbilt has long been shorthand for classic rags to riches, then back to rags tale. Yet that easy cliché conceals a more complicated truth. Not all Vanderbilts vanished into the fog of squandered inheritance. In fact, a few quietly and effectively continue to build. Take, for instance, the family's most enduring symbol, the Biltmore Estate. Nestled among the rolling hills of Asheville, North Carolina, the Biltmore remains the largest private home in the United States. Constructed between 1889 and 1895 in the French Renaissance style by George Washington Vanderbilt II, the estate sprawls across 8,000 acres, encompassing 250 rooms of near-mythic scale and design. Today, its estimated worth exceeds $300 million, a monument to an era of unrestrained imagination and industrial power. And unlike so many of their contemporaries, the descendants of George Vanderbilt managed to hold on to their inheritance. The estate is still firmly under the stewardship of the Vanderbilt line, specifically through the family of George's grandson, William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil. Following the passing of William A.V. Cecil Sr. and his wife, Mary Mimi Cecil, in 2017, their two children, William A. Bill Cecil Jr. and Diana Deanie Cecil Pickering, took the helm. Born in Asheville on the 17th of August, 1928, William Cecil Sr. was the youngest son of Cornelia Vanderbilt Cecil and John Amherst Cecil, a man of British nobility. His upbringing was characteristically cosmopolitan. Educated in England and Switzerland, serving in the British Navy during the Second World War, and graduating from Harvard in 1952 before a brief career in finance with Chase Manhattan Bank. In 1957, he married Mary Mimi Ryan, a sharp-minded Wall Street attorney who also happened to be a first cousin of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. And by 1960, the couple had returned to Asheville with a shared purpose: to breathe new life into the Biltmore Estate and, by extension, the Vanderbilt name itself. But their task was formidable. The estate had fallen into disrepair, burdened by the financial realities of the mid-20th century. Yet William Cecil approached it not as a relic of past glory, but as a living enterprise. His revival was pragmatic, hands-on, and quietly visionary. He and Mimi personally oversaw marketing materials, posed for brochure photographs, and cultivated partnerships that positioned the Biltmore not as a museum of excess, but as a cornerstone of regional tourism. And the effort paid off. By 1969, for the first time in decades, the estate turned a profit, transforming Asheville into one of the South's most sought-after destinations. And Mimi Cecil was far more than a supportive spouse. Her intellect and managerial insight became essential to the estate's evolution, complementing her husband's entrepreneurial drive. Together, they embodied a form of modern stewardship that transcended nostalgia, rooted in history, but unafraid of adaptation. Their greatest legacy, however, may well be their children. Bill Cecil Jr. now serves as CEO of the Biltmore Company, while his sister, Deanie Pickering, presides as the chair of the board. Under their guidance, The estate has continued to thrive, attracting more than 1.4 million visitors each year, a living monument not only to Gilded Age ambition, but to the quiet perseverance of the family behind it. Yet, for every success like this one, there were countless others in the Vanderbilt lineage that ended quite differently. While the Cecils of Asheville rose to prominence through discipline and reinvention, other branches of the family tree descended into the genteel obscurity that often follows old wealth. Now, to understand how one Vanderbilt lineage endured while others dissipated, we must first turn back the clock to the age when fortune was born. It began, as so many American myths do, with one man of uncommon will. Cornelius Vanderbilt, known simply as a Commodore, embodied the self-made American archetype. From a humble ferry operator, he built an empire of ships and railroads so vast that by the time of his death, his fortune, worth the modern equivalent of more than $100 billion, had few equals in history. Now, Vanderbilt's approach to business was both parts aggression and austerity. Rather than squander them, his discipline extended his family life, where he instilled in his son, William Henry Vanderbilt, a rigorous sense of duty and frugality. It was an education that bore results. Despite early doubts about his competence, William's performance exceeded every expectation. Under his command, the family's railroads flourished, and the fortune his father left him did not merely survive, it doubled when William died. The Vanderbilt coffers had swelled from $100 million to $200 million, or roughly $6 billion in today's currency, all amassed in an era untouched by federal income tax. But vast fortunes seldom survived their founders unscathed. The Vanderbilt story soon became a case study in the perils of inheritance, a saga of inherited luxury and vanishing restraint. William Kissam Vanderbilt, one of William's sons, and his wife Alva, epitomized this transformation. Alva, an ambitious socialite of unshakable conviction, was determined to secure the family's place within the highest circles of New York society, no matter the cost. Her 1883 masquerade ball, hosted to christen their new Fifth Avenue mansion, was said to have cost more than $250,000, over $8 million in modern terms, lavish upon a single evening. It worked. The event became legend, cementing the Vanderbilts as the peak of Gilded Age grandeur. A later generation continued the spectacle. Florence Adele Vanderbilt, another of William Henry's children, was profiled in Collier's magazine in 1946 for her staggering extravagance. She owns 15 automobiles, the article noted, pays for her chef $25,000 a year, and keeps 100 servants across her estates. Her New York mansion, boasting 70 rooms, had become a gilded echo of a bygone age. Against this backdrop of theatrical spending, one Vanderbilt pursued a different path. George Washington Vanderbilt II, born in 1862, inherited the family's aesthetic sensibility, but not its appetite for ostentation. Quiet, studious, and refined, George turned his ambitions toward culture, art, and education rather than commerce. Yet his vision of beauty was no less grand. Captivated by the pastoral landscapes of Asheville, North Carolina, he conceived what would become the Biltmore Estate, a project that fused European refinement with American audacity. Now, the very name Biltmore, combining his Dutch ancestral home, the Bilt, with the Anglo-Saxon moor, meaning moorland, combined the very essence of heritage in their modern setting. Between 1889 and 1895, Biltmore spanned more than 125,000 acres and integrated over 700 parcels of land. George enlisted architect Richard Morris Hunt, a master of the Beaux-Arts style, and landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted, famed designer of Central Park. The result was a masterpiece of the American Gilded Age, a mansion that cost $5 million to build, more than $200 million in today's value. When the estate opened on Christmas Eve of 1895, it was less a house than a declaration. Its guest list included writers such as Edith Wharton and Henry James, diplomats Joseph Choate and Lars Anderson, and even U.S. presidents. 3 years later, George married Edith Stuyvesant Dresser in Paris, a union that blended old-world lineage with American distinction. Their daughter, Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt was born in 1900 within the Louis XIV room of the Biltmore, a child of privilege raised amid gardens, galleries, and grandeur. Yet, for all of its brilliance, the Vanderbilt saga remained cyclical. Wealth was earned, wealth was enjoyed, and then wealth was imperiled. The story of the Biltmore would soon hinge on Cornelia herself, whose tumultuous life would imperil the estate, yet ultimately secured survival in a most unexpected way. Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt grew up surrounded by a world few could imagine. Her childhood unfolded within the gilded halls of the Biltmore Estate, the grand creation of her father, George Washington Vanderbilt II. As the only child of George and Edith Stuyvesant Dresser, Cornelia's upbringing reflected the ideals of privilege tempered by culture. Her early years were spent among tutors, gardens, and art, and she accompanied her parents on extended tours across Europe, where she absorbed a sense of refinement that seemed inseparable from her family name. That charmed existence changed abruptly in 1914 when George Vanderbilt died unexpectedly, leaving 13-year-old Cornelia and her mother to manage a property whose scope would challenge even seasoned industrialists. Edith, perceptive and pragmatic, recognized the burden that maintaining such an estate represented in a changing America. Now, in 1917, just as a newly imposed federal income tax started to ravage the fortunes of Gilded Age families, she sold 86,000 acres of Biltmore land to the U.S. Forest Service. The sale, inspired by her late husband's vision of scientific forestry, helped establish the Pisgah National Forest and, in doing so, safeguarded both the estate's financial future and its environmental legacy. In 1924, Cornelia married John Francis Amherst Cecil, a member of British nobility whose lineage traced to the Marquis of Salisbury. Their wedding at All Souls Church, followed by a reception in the banquet hall of Biltmore House, symbolized a transatlantic union of wealth and heritage. Together, Cornelia and John faced new challenges brought by the Great Depression. In 1930, with Asheville's economy faltering, they made a bold decision, opening Biltmore House to the public. The move was both practical and prescient. It generated revenue, it provided jobs, and it transformed the estate into a living museum of American ambition. Its doors no longer reserved for the privileged few, but for a nation eager to glimpse its grandeur. Yet behind the estate's success, Cornelia's own life was unsettled. In 1934, she divorced John Cecil and moved to Europe, leaving behind the house that had defined her legacy. John remained at Biltmore's bachelor's wing until his death in 1954, maintaining the estate with quiet dignity. Their eldest son, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil, assumed oversight briefly, while the younger, William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil, returned in the late 1950s to lead the estate into its modern era. You see, William Cecil was more than a caretaker. He was a strategist with the mind of a financier and the instinct of a builder. Born in 1928, educated in England, Switzerland, and later Harvard, he served in the British Navy during World War II before joining Chase Manhattan Bank. His marriage in 1957 to Mary Lee Mimi Ryan, a Wall Street lawyer and first cousin of Jacqueline Onassis, connected the Vanderbilts to yet another strand of American aristocracy. When the Cecils moved back to Asheville in 1960, the estate was in precarious condition, majestic but unprofitable, burdened by maintenance costs and fading relevance. William saw potential where others saw decay. With a banker's discipline and an entrepreneur's foresight, he reimagined Biltmore not as a relic, but as an enterprise. He revitalized its dairy operations, diversified its agriculture, and opened new revenue streams through hospitality and tourism. In 1963, he secured the estate's designation as a National Historic Landmark, anchoring it firmly in the nation's cultural consciousness. But perhaps his most visionary move came in 1985, when he launched the Biltmore Winery, a venture that transformed the estate into a destination for both history and taste. The winery became one of America's most successful, and with it, Biltmore's financial future was secured. By the 1990s, William began transferring responsibility to the next generation. His son, William A. Bill Cecil Jr., assumed leadership as CEO, while his daughter, Diana Deanie Cecil Pickering, took on the role of board chair. Together, they expanded the Biltmore experience with additions like the Inn on Biltmore Estate and the Village Hotel, extending the family's hospitality tradition into the 21st century. Under their stewardship, the Biltmore transformed into a heritage landmark and a thriving enterprise. Each year, over 1.4 million visitors walk its grounds, not merely to marvel at its architecture, but to witness a rare continuity of American legacy. The younger generation, Ryan and Aubrey Cecil, along with Chase Pickering, now carry that legacy forward. Ryan oversees investment strategy as Director of Investments at Lioncrest Capital. Aubrey manages the estate's attraction division, and Chase directs its marketing and hospitality initiatives, particularly Antler Hill Village, home to the celebrated winery. To preserve the family's values amidst expansion, Deanie Pickering introduced a family charter, a document outlining the principles of stewardship, accountability, and collaboration. The Biltmore today stands not only as a triumph of architecture, but as a rebuke to the narrative of inevitable old money family decline. The family now convenes twice a year for strategic meetings, blending the warmth of tradition with the rigor of corporate governance. These gatherings have evolved into what they call Family Council, a structure that includes both kin and trusted advisors. Its purpose is not merely to manage assets, but to protect an ethos, the sense that Biltmore is both inheritance and obligation. More than a century after George Vanderbilt opened his mansion's doors, the Cecils continue to embody the paradox of old money reimagined. They preserve the past, not by encasing it in amber, but by allowing it to breathe, transforming stone and soil into a living institution, where so many fortunes dissolve into nostalgia. This branch of the Vanderbilt family achieved something rarer, the alchemy of endurance. And now I'd love to see you in the comments. Have you ever visited the Biltmore, or imagined what it must have been like to live there? We look forward to hearing from you. And thanks for joining us for another episode of U.S. History Insights and Biographies. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.